Well, hello, today is April Fool's Day 2020, and there's never been another year like this that has been so surreal, and we're already only in the fourth month. And I thought that this decade was going to be pretty weird, because the last decade was all about everybody obsessed with their mobile devices and information overload, and now we have a presidency that is so different than anything that we've ever experienced. And at the same time, though, we all saw it coming in some way, sometime down the line, that there was going to be a sort of corporate empire, sort of cultic thing that is going to take over this country here slowly. And it sort of happened when people didn't expect it. And 4 years ago, I admit I was one of, well, no, I'm actually bragging. March of 2016, I posted an article predicting Trump was going to win, and in thousands of words talking about why and how he was going to do it and things like that. And I wasn't liked for that, and I was not popular. And I was so mad at the West Coast progressive type folks that I managed to taunt people on social media about having Donald Trump portrayed in a positive way in my profile picture, getting everybody to think that I'm supporting him without even saying anything. Just putting a picture of him smiling in front of American flag just freaked people out so much that it's kind of like, okay, this is weird. Usually it's the educated left wing that looks deeper into stuff. And now we have such an aversion over things that just an image will get us to make up our mind right away that this person is a Trumpy and they're evil and they're bad and we have to not listen to them, kind of a thing, without even asking, hey, what actually are your views? Maybe I'll actually go to your YouTube and find out all the horrible things you say about President Trump. And I continue to baffle people with some of my stuff that I do. You know, walking around with a red hat that says hug a Trumpy and things like that gets people on the left to actually not think, which is really sad. Because there's only been a couple of folks that have really dug deep enough into some of my social media campaigns, some of my art projects to find out what I'm actually doing, what I actually mean. And at the same time, I'm building bridges with the political and religious right here in the States as I travel full-time in my RV. And what a great time to be mobile and to have the ability to live off the grid in a global pandemic. And I really don't know what to think at this point. I spent a lot of March in denial. I spent a lot of March in this thing where I was like, oh, I can handle this because, you know, I have been germ conscious, or what some might call a germaphobe, for many years on and off in my life, mostly developing in my 40s. And in my early 40s, I was suffering from paranoia, and basically this global pandemic thing, whether it is as severe as some people say it is or not, is one of my worst fears come true. Somebody who has a hard time shaking people's hands, like the show Monk with Adrian Monk, and he's always asking for these antibacterial wipes. That's me. There are very few people that suffer from disorders like this. I did meet a younger guy a couple months ago who suffers about like I do when it comes to stuff like that. And I don't think he really was public about it. He did talk a bit about his mental health, but he was a social media influencer, and I was hoping that maybe he would speak a little more publicly in depth about that. And I bet he's freaking out as well. So I try to keep my eye on the American right wing about what they're saying, what they're believing, what they're being fed, and right now I really don't know what to say, because I hang out with mostly where I'm staying at right now. Luckily, I'm in an isolated community and somewhere in the United States. And there's still some dangers, definitely, because we just had our first reported case in this county that I'm staying in here just this week. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about, now, I bought this hand sanitizer way back in, I think, early February, when I was staying out by the Salton Sea, because I was running out of these. So now all my bottles are empty, so I get to fill them. And this is all the envy of a lot of people who can't find their fucking hand sanitizer, because now all the people that are saying, oh, you shouldn't use that stuff, it actually hurts your immune system and dries out your skin, and it actually makes you more susceptible. It's like, these are now the people that are using this stuff all the time. And it's really weird, because a lot of what I notice in my life, and I've said this before on camera, is I'm supposed to be the crazy one, because I notice high-functioning people who do not identify as peers, which means they don't identify as somebody who lives with debilitating mental disorders, and these are career people, family people, powerful people, and occasionally they display symptoms of mental disorders, and people really don't think much about it. Oops, this one got too full here. And so one of the things that I've noticed is that, like I said, with the very little exposure that I'm having towards the political right wing, which I usually hang out with a lot of right wing people, I find them very refreshing, and it's always nice to find common things and to build bridges. And there's certain things about their culture that I actually find more comfortable being around than the complicated sort of cultural things that I grew up with in progressive, educated, urban culture, which takes a lot of, really, it takes being able to function in a culture that is very subtle and very passive aggressive and things like that. And I just, after all these years, I decided, I just don't think I can learn how to cope with people who aren't direct. And now I have to basically cope with not having been socially developed, and at my age, probably never going to learn how these people will say one thing and mean another, and everybody gets it but me. That's kind of how I grew up, And but one thing I've noticed is that the people that I think are overreacting are usually on the left wing of stuff. And the folks that I think really should be doing more are usually on the right wing. And the little I've seen of President Trump and how he's handling this, if there's one way I can describe my impression of how the president is addressing this global pandemic, is he kind of looks like the cat that ate the canary. It's like he's chuckling and making jokes. I mean, like on live TV here recently, he signed this multi-trillion-dollar thing and he made a joke about it. And then everybody was standing behind him, taking turns kind of congratulating him on doing some really amazing thing, which really what it is like, if somebody is that addicted to power, then that is an amazing thing to be the catalyst for that much money going from one place to another. That is an amazing power rush. I mean, how many people get to sign paperwork for, I think it was like $6 trillion total when it came to the different bills and the different things that were being passed. And that changes every day. And so when it comes to, seeing what's going on TV, I haven't caught the news for 2 or 3 days, and I'm probably really behind because every day there's something going on. And so here's the thing I keep asking people, and I even asked somebody who works for the government, about the big question. Of course, the big question for me is not if we're going to have martial law, is when. And I might be wrong, but it just seems like there's some things that are being said on the news that are incomplete and that give the impression that there's something going on behind it. For instance, the big one that I've noticed is, well, besides privacy, and I'll get into that because that's creepy, is America is unprepared for this, and at the same time, okay, why is this insider trading stuff going on? Why are the rich and powerful finding out about this stuff before the American public did, before all the healthcare folks were able to prepare for something like this? And the weird thing is like, there'll be two news stories almost back to back. And it'd be interesting if somebody actually made a comment and said, hey, we just said we were unprepared, and then when it came to the rich and powerful, we are prepared. What the fuck's going on? You know, kind of a thing. And the other thing that they were saying, this is what China did, and it worked, kind of a thing. And it had to do with invasion of privacy. And it made the Snowden stuff, you know. I mean, here... you know, when Mr. Snowden was working for the government, he was involved in stuff, and this was like around 10, 20 years ago. Just imagine what kind of privacy stuff is going on these days with the advanced technology that we have, even in the last year or two, that is advanced. So that leads me to another thing too. Yes, the timing is really weird. It's the perfect storm. It is the ultimate clusterfuck because I'm not sure how they're doing the census this year. I haven't looked into it, so I'm confessing all my ignorance about this stuff. But there are some things that I have noticed that give me the creeps. Okay, so this is supposed to be National Census Day. Very convenient. It could be an accident. It could be a coincidence. And of course, this is election year. And so if somebody was planning a global pandemic somehow, and if they wanted to knock out certain demographics, and if it wanted to be at a certain time, then this is absolutely the perfect time to unleash the beast of this thing that is more scary than a terrorist thing going on. Because with terrorism, it's kind of a similar scare, is that we have something that we can't centralize and say, this is where it comes from. If we just target the source, then it'll all be good. No, we got things that are hiding everywhere. We got something that's literally so small it can hide anywhere. Now, with the terrorism threat, it was, you know, very rare that anybody would suffer a terrorist attack. And although, you know, 10, 20 years ago, people were scared of it as if they were scared of car accidents, which if you look at the statistics, it's staggering how rare it would be to be hurt or killed in a terrorist attack. You might as well get hit by lightning twice. And so that kind of scare isn't so rampant as it was during the 9/11 type stuff. But when it comes to virus stuff, another one is somebody was talking about Bill Gates and things like that. And that, you know, he's developed some technology. And, you know, I've talked to some people that are into conspiracy stuff, and I always take it with a grain of salt, but I always want to stay open-minded. But somebody was talking about, you know, nanocircuitry being injected into you, and then of course that leads to, okay, well, I have the technology to make these little things, but, you know, of course the big question is, does it interface the brain in a way that would actually do something productive for whatever it is that some government or pseudo-government type thing is trying to do to people? And of course that could be true when it comes to, like, if they ever do get a vaccine and everybody has to get it, then this could be a way to take sort of a census where people are really, really feel like they're backed into a corner. Folks that don't want to be seen very much or at all by the United States government. And there's a lot of people that don't trust the government, especially on the left wing. And so that's going to lead to a whole bunch of interesting stuff. So this is what freaked me out. Simply because, if there was going to be a civil war between the mainstream media, American public, which is more on the left as far as I could tell when I talk to people, against institutions like law enforcement and military, which is influenced heavily by right-wing ideologies and thinking and politics and stuff like that. And if there was going to be some type of conflict, of course, the best way to do that would be to find a reason to have a militant state. And now we have the perfect reason to do that. And so whether people staying at home is really the best thing to do right now or not, it's still the fact that people are staying home and giving power simply because of our obedience to something that we are being told, that does give a sort of allegiance. It does give a sort of power to those who might want to overly influence people, whether it's in our best interest or not. So, are we going to have martial law? Well, here's another thing that the media is hinting at too, is that because people are scared, they're going to lose control. And especially the things I talk about, like rural American men that don't have access to mental health care, are very prone to violent crime and being very threatening and being very controlling and hijacking people's power in situations with firearms and things like that. And there was some hints in the news last week about that, which kind of makes me think, okay, well, why are they talking about this? Because there's people that go nutty at Walmart and they get mad and they threaten people. I mean, that happens sometimes. It's just that in the context of there being a scarcity, which we really don't have a scarcity at this point. And the irony, of course, is the scarcity of toilet paper and stuff like this. This is probably the envy of a lot of people in the world to have this precious thing of hand sanitizer. And like the guy that bought a bunch of these and tried to sell them online for $1 million a bottle or something like that. And then, of course, we get mad at these opportunists. And then I get the timing for this is giving me a moral dilemma, because I've been working up to a big publicity campaign for one of my big projects, which is my fake presidency. But I haven't been fake Zappa publicly. In fact, I haven't done anything publicly for several weeks. And so I let my beard grow back and stuff like that, and working on my computer and trying to get some stuff done that was way behind because of some setbacks and stuff like that. And focusing on my band again, Dialectic Flowers, and doing more meditation music and becoming the wizard and that kind of stuff. So, here's something weird about Bill Gates, is that the things that come up on YouTube and Netflix I find is interesting, because a lot of times they want to show you what's recommended, and often the recommended stuff are things that are becoming viral, and they could be current things and they could be older things that come up. For instance, the movie Outbreak from the mid-90s. I hated that movie. It freaked me out. I was in a very impressionable place in my life at that point. And I saw it at this house and I got mad because they showed it to me. It was that disturbing. And I think that's part of the reason why this has been so hard on me, is because that's one of our worst fears, is something we have very little control over, which is a microscopic organism And and then one of those videos that came up as being popular was this thing about Bill Gates, about are we ready for a global pandemic sort of a thing, basically. I didn't watch it, but anyways, I don't know if that means anything. I don't trust people on the left or right wing, because basically both of them want to take over this country entirely. And there's very few of these folks that really want to cope with each other and get along, find out how to communicate with each other and stuff like that. And it is really weird seeing President Trump, and I think I said this just earlier, is that he kind of reminds me of the cat that ate the canary when he's talking about the coronavirus issues and stuff like that. I'm sure he said this to his followers, but what mainstream television is showing is kind of showing him doing this sort of like, ooh, this is an opportunity, or we knew this was coming, or maybe somebody I know was working on this somewhere, whether it was our government or their government or something like that. And there's people for years that said that God himself created the HIV virus in order to obliterate gays. Well, conveniently, it seems to go after Africans as well. And so if there were somebody who wanted to create a virus that could go after homosexuals and Africans, and you see that where you have a lot of abuse of power and people that have too much power, you usually see old, white, heterosexual males. And that would be something that was either, oh, well, that's very convenient that there happens to be a virus that takes down and is not necessarily targeted, but it's a coincidence that it happens to go after some very unliked demographics. And now here we have the baby boomers, which is an unliked demographic for the simple fact that America is wondering if we have enough senior care to handle the biggest boom in population that we've had in a long time, which of course is called the baby boom, the baby boomers, the post-war kids that were born from 1945 up to about 1965 or maybe later. And these people are prone to this thing, and that's sad. That's very sad, because there's a lot of folks that are getting infected. Now, there was a time here around the middle of March when I played around with the idea that this virus thing was completely made up. It still very well could be, because it is very easy to, poison somebody and make them think that it's this virus and publicize various people and mess with numbers and create a huge cloud of false information that there's a virus when there very well could not be. Well, it's starting to come down to the fact that I'm meeting people that know people that have tested positive for it. And so that's really starting to hit me hard. And a lot of my ideas about being open-minded about, well, this whole thing just could be a big farce. It could be a big show, because we've had things in media. For instance, the inauguration, I think that's what it was. But anyways, they showed Washington, D.C., and it was full of people. And then they have another photo saying, this is really what happened. And there's very few people there. And it was a completely different scene. And roughly half of the American public bought one picture, and the other half bought the other picture as being real. So what we're getting is what I call a two-ring circus. Is President Trump has succeeded at creating this circus right here. And this circus is a performance for the American left wing. And it's saying that, oh, scaring people, and we're stupid and we're doing stupid stuff and we're undermining civil rights and we're pushing your buttons and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff, whether it really is that extreme or not. That's sort of like, that's one ring of the circus. And then the other ring of the circus is catered towards his followers, not necessarily those that are Republican or right-wing or whatever, because there are a handful of folks that don't support President Trump that might agree with the views of that particular ideology. However, everybody that I've met who identifies as a born-again Christian or as a Republican, every single person that I've met that I can think of, I've never met Joe Scarborough or some of these other guys, but still, I meet a lot of people, if they are on the conservative right or they identify with that, like when it comes to the issues of like, pro-life type stuff and all of their pet issues that they vote for and stuff like that, they are supporting President Trump in a way that's even more intense than what I saw 4 years ago, which that's why I think he's going to get reelected. And part of the circus that he's doing is on the right wing, he's affirming them and all this kind of stuff. And also there's some weird jargon about the coronavirus that's being fed to the right wing, which I think is really strange. So it's almost like this, this particular issue, there is another act, okay, we're in scene 10 now of the two-ring circus, and it's called the coronavirus. And now we're going to freak out the left, and we're going to affirm the right, make you feel all comfortable and all this kind of stuff. And it's the same thing. And this could very well be, I would say, from a practical standpoint, that just like any virus could evolve into something that could really, really weaken humanity on a global scale. And these things can very well happen on accident. It could just very well have been that there was this virus that was laid hidden for tens of thousands of years in the polar ice caps and suddenly melted and somebody got exposed to it and spread it. I mean, that's one theory that I heard. So it's really hard to say, but there are people that say, oh, well, there's biological warfare things going on in Wuhan, or the Americans brought it there because they don't like the Chinese and they want to blame it on the Chinese. And we even have the president, I don't know if he's still calling it this, but calling it the Chinese virus or the Kung flu or things like that, that really pushes the buttons of those who are the tolerant, affirming, especially racially affirming and culturally affirming type people and stuff like that. It's not the Chinese virus. It's kind of like, it's not Obamacare. Don't put his name on it. The right wing seem to put Obama's name on Obamacare. So they like to call things certain things that freak out certain other people. And it's really hard to say where this could go, but I don't think it's going to get any better, and I don't think it's going to get any better any soon. Because if it wasn't just for the virus killing people, and really the numbers compared to the numbers of folks that die from heart disease, cancer, automobile accidents, and suicide, like mental health issues, it's nothing compared to that at this point. And chances are, because things have calmed down in China, that it very well could calm down in the Western world. And I think I just mentioned this earlier, but still I want to emphasize this too, is that the media was saying that this is how China handled it, was because they did some things to invade people's privacy, which is kind of like hint, hint, And it really freaked me out because I had just gotten a new cell service and I was worried about some privacy issues. And I was talking to the guy when I was getting my cell phone. And really, 10, 20 years ago when you got a phone, you had the choice how anonymous you wanted to be. And it looks like we don't have those choices anymore. You have a phone, no matter if you paid cash for it, thinking it's some kind of drop phone or something like that. Even if you have an anonymous Google and Facebook and stuff like that, it's just, I don't think it's the way it was when we were younger and this kind of technology was first being developed. And here's the thing, is that I have to trust and I have to distrust. I don't trust any of these companies, any of these governments when it comes to my privacy, because chances are, if they wanted to, if they had good reason to, they could invade my privacy. And I've said enough things publicly that people would consider, quote, un-American, that if it ever came down to something that resembled a fascist theocracy, I'm quoting Frank Zappa when he was talking about that over 30 years ago, that's what a lot of folks are working towards, is I would really have to consider my risks and if it's worth it staying in this country. And I admire people like Ai Weiwei and things like that. It's just, a lot of it has to do with the power that somebody has. And right now I'm having to cope with and affirm the power that I have as an artist, my current reach, and how much power do I have to do the work that I feel like I'm skilled and, for lack of a better term, called to do. And do I have the functioning level? Do I have the support to do that? And it's been very difficult trying to reconcile that in my mind and feel like, well, I've tried to rely on a lot of people and getting nowhere, and it mostly being counterproductive. And how do I, at my functioning level, come on phone, this autofocus, I'm getting used to it. How do I cope running a business, not only with me going crazy, trying to find my own sanity and not having the access to mental health care that's anywhere legitimate, anywhere productive. Well, every single person, it seems like, is going crazy around me and exhibiting different aspects of mental disorders that I've lived with for a long time, especially when it comes to paranoia. About 3 years ago, I tried to get into the psych ward because I was dealing with, I want to call it agoraphobia, but I think somebody also called it agoraphobia. But anyways, the fear of going out. And this is the first week that I haven't gone out of the little bubble that I'm staying in right now, and I'm really getting cabin fever. And the last time I went into a town, it wasn't a very big town, but last week it really freaked me out. And I just felt like people were either taking it too seriously